Welcome back to ConspiraNap. Before we dive into tonight's investigation, I hope your day has treated you well, wherever you are in this vast world. Whether it's the quiet hours before dawn where you're listening, or perhaps you're settling in as evening falls, thank you for being here with us. If you're new to our channel, we explore the stories that slip through the cracks of official narratives, the cases that get buried, the witnesses who disappear, and the truths that powerful people never want you to hear. If these investigations resonate with you, please consider subscribing to ConspiraNap. Your support helps us continue digging where others fear to tread. Tonight's story isn't just another government cover-up. It's about a researcher who vanished while investigating what might be the most sophisticated mind control program in American history. Her name was Dr. Elena Vasquez, and what she uncovered in the sterile corridors of a private medical facility would challenge everything we think we know about memory, identity, and the malleability of human consciousness. This is the story of Project Echo, a program that didn't just seek to control minds, but to rewrite them entirely. And somewhere in the digital underground, fragments of Dr. Vasquez's final research still circulate, whispering of horrors that make MKUltra look like a children's game. Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent 15 years studying the human brain's capacity for memory formation and retrieval. Her work at Johns Hopkins had earned her recognition in neuroscience circles, particularly her research into how traumatic memories could be selectively suppressed without affecting other cognitive functions. It was groundbreaking work that promised to help soldiers suffering from PTSD and victims of severe psychological trauma. That expertise is exactly what made her a target. The invitation came through official channels, a research grant from the Cognitive Enhancement Institute, a private foundation with connections to both pharmaceutical giants and defense contractors. They offered her an unprecedented budget to continue her memory research at their state-of-the-art facility outside Baltimore. The work would be classified, they explained, but the potential applications for treating veterans made it a patriotic duty. Dr. Vasquez should have been suspicious of the secrecy, but the promise of unlimited resources and the chance to help suffering soldiers overcame her caution. She accepted the position and reported to the CEI facility on a cold Monday morning in February 2019. The Cognitive Enhancement Institute looked like any other modern medical research center. Glass and steel architecture, sterile corridors lined with motivational posters about advancing human potential. But there were subtle differences that set off warning bells in Elena's mind. The security was more extensive than necessary for medical research. Keycard access was required for every floor, every room. Cameras tracked movement through every corridor. And the staff had a peculiar quality, polite, professional, but with eyes that seemed to be constantly evaluating, measuring, recording. Her supervisor, Dr. Marcus Webb, was a tall man in his 50s, with prematurely grey hair and the kind of calm demeanor that came from years of keeping dangerous secrets. He showed her to her laboratory, a pristine space equipped with the latest neuroimaging technology, and explained her assignment. "We're working on memory modification protocols," he said, his voice carrying no emotion whatsoever. "Specifically, we need to understand how to implant false memories so seamlessly that the subject never realizes their recollections have been altered." Elena stopped unpacking her equipment. "I'm sorry, what?" "My research is about helping people recover from trauma, not implanting false memories." Dr. Webb's smile never wavered. "The applications are broader than you might think, Dr. Vasquez. Consider a soldier who's witnessed war crimes committed by his own unit. Traditional therapy might help him cope, but what if we could simply replace those traumatic memories with more palatable alternatives? He returns home whole, functional, patriotic." "That's not therapy," Elena said, her voice sharp. "That's brainwashing." "That's progress," Webb replied, "and it's what you've been brought here to perfect." Over the following weeks, Eleanor was gradually introduced to the full scope of Project Echo. The facility wasn't just researching memory modification, they were actively implementing it. Subjects were brought in regularly, usually during night shifts when Eleanor wasn't supposed to be working. But her curiosity got the better of her, and she began staying late, observing the procedures through security cameras she'd learned to access. The subjects were diverse: former military personnel, government employees, occasionally civilians who seemed to have stumbled onto sensitive information. They would arrive conscious but compliant, usually accompanied by handlers who spoke in the clipped tones of intelligence operatives. Within hours, they would leave with subtle but fundamental changes to their personalities, their beliefs, their very sense of identity. The process was elegant in its horror. Using a combination of targeted electromagnetic stimulation, pharmaceutical intervention, and carefully crafted sensory experiences, the technicians could access specific memory networks in the brain and rewrite them like editing a document. Traumatic experiences could be replaced with pleasant vacations. Inconvenient knowledge could be swapped out for harmless misinformation. Political beliefs could be adjusted to ensure loyalty. Elena documented everything she could, secretly recording procedures and copying files to encrypted drives she hid in her apartment. She knew she was witnessing something monstrous, but she needed proof before she could expose it. The breakthrough came when she gained access to the patient files. Each subject had a detailed psychological profile, including their original memories and the false memories that had been implanted. The precision was breathtaking. Entire life histories rewritten with surgical accuracy. But more disturbing were the success rate statistics and the long-term monitoring protocols. Project Echo wasn't just modifying memories for therapeutic purposes. They were creating a network of unknowing assets, people who had been programmed with false experiences, implanted loyalties, and embedded triggers that could be activated at will. A journalist who had been investigating defense contractors suddenly remembered becoming interested in cooking instead. A congressional aide who had been asking uncomfortable questions about black budget programs now believed his passion was gardening. The scope was staggering. According to the files Elena accessed, Project Echo had processed over 3,000 subjects in the past 5 years. Each one returned to their normal lives carrying invisible modifications that served the interests of whoever was funding the program. Elena knew she had to act quickly. The evidence she'd gathered was damning, but she needed to get it to someone who could expose the program before she was discovered. She began reaching out to investigative journalists, human rights organizations, anyone who might have the platform and courage to reveal what was happening. That's when they realized she knew too much. Elena first noticed the surveillance on a Thursday evening as she left the facility. The same black sedan had been in the parking garage that morning, and now it was following her home. When she varied her route, the sedan stayed with her, maintaining a careful distance but never losing sight of her vehicle. At her apartment, she activated the security measures she'd installed after beginning her investigation. Encrypted communications, hidden cameras, multiple escape routes. The watchers were being careful, but they were definitely there. Phone calls that ended abruptly when she answered. Neighbors who suddenly took an interest in her comings and goings. Repair workers who seemed more interested in her apartment than the building's infrastructure. Elena accelerated her efforts to get the evidence out. She uploaded encrypted files to secure servers, mailed physical copies to journalists, and prepared dead man switches that would automatically release everything if she disappeared. But she underestimated how quickly they would move. On a Friday morning in March, Eleanor arrived at the facility to find her keycard access had been revoked. Dr. Webb was waiting in the lobby with security personnel and what appeared to be medical staff. Dr. Vasquez, he said with that same emotionless smile. We need to discuss some concerns about your mental health. You've been exhibiting signs of paranoid behavior, and we think it would be best if you participated in one of our therapeutic programs. Elena backed toward the exit, but the security guards had already positioned themselves to block her escape. I'm not paranoid, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. I know what you're doing here. I have evidence. Evidence of what? Webb asked, gesturing for the medical staff to approach. Dr. Vasquez, you've been under a great deal of stress. Your research into traumatic memory has clearly affected your own psychological state. You're imagining conspiracies that don't exist. As the medical staff moved closer, Elena realized they were carrying sedatives. This wasn't an arrest. It was an intervention. They were going to make her a subject of her own research. The files, she said desperately. The patient records. The 3,000 subjects. Project Echo. Webb's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about, Dr. Vasquez. There is no Project Echo. You've been working on standard memory therapy research. Perhaps the stress of the work has caused you to develop false memories of your own. The injection site on her arm burned as the sedative took effect. Elena's vision blurred, but she managed one final act of defiance. With her phone's emergency function, she sent a predetermined text message to every contact in her list. Echo is real. They're taking me now. Remember my name. Elena awoke in a pristine white room that looked exactly like the treatment chambers she'd observed. She was restrained in a chair surrounded by the same electromagnetic stimulation equipment, the same neuroimaging displays, the same pharmaceutical drip systems she'd seen used on other subjects. Dr. Webb stood beside her, now wearing the clinical scrubs of a technician rather than his administrative suit. Good morning, Elena. I hope you slept well. We're going to take very good care of you. You can't do this, Elena said, though her words came out slurred from the lingering effects of the sedative. People know I'm here. They'll come looking for me. Who will come looking? Webb asked gently, consulting a tablet. Dr. Elena Vasquez, age 38, suffered a complete psychological breakdown while working on classified memory research. She became convinced that her colleagues were involved in elaborate conspiracies and began exhibiting severe paranoid delusions. Tragically, she took her own life rather than accept treatment for her condition. Elena's blood ran cold. I'm not dead. Not yet, Webb agreed. But Dr. Elena Vasquez, the person who believed in research ethics and human rights, that version of you is about to cease existing. The woman who leaves this facility will have different memories, different beliefs, different priorities. She'll be much happier, I assure you. The procedure began with electromagnetic mapping of Elena's brain, identifying the specific neural networks associated with her memories of Project Echo, her ethical concerns, her investigative instincts. The technology was incredibly precise, able to target individual synaptic connections while leaving the rest of her cognitive function intact. As the electromagnetic fields intensified, Elena felt her thoughts becoming fluid, malleable. Memories began to shift and change like reflections in disturbed water. Her recollections of discovering the patient files were replaced with memories of routine administrative work. Her horror at witnessing the procedures became satisfaction at helping develop therapeutic protocols. But Elena had one advantage the technicians didn't know about. Her years of memory research had taught her techniques for protecting core memories from external manipulation. As the false memories were being implanted, she used those techniques to create hidden reserves of her true experiences, burying them deep in her subconscious, where the scanning equipment couldn't detect them. The process took hours. When it was complete, the woman who sat in the chair still looked like Dr. Elena Vasquez, but her personality had been fundamentally altered. She was compliant, cooperative, and completely convinced that her work at the Cognitive Enhancement Institute was helping people. Her memories of investigating Project Echo had been replaced with a false narrative about suffering a stress-induced breakdown and receiving excellent care from her colleagues. She was released the following week with a clean bill of mental health and a recommendation for extended medical leave. The Elena Vasquez who returned to her apartment was, for all practical purposes, a different person. She had no interest in investigating anything, no concerns about ethics or human rights, and no memory of the evidence she'd hidden. But deep in her subconscious, the real Elena Vasquez was still there, waiting. The breakthrough came 6 months later, during what should have been a routine psychological evaluation. Eleanor had been seeing Dr. Sarah Chen, a therapist recommended by the Cognitive Enhancement Institute, for regular sessions to monitor her recovery from her alleged breakdown. Dr. Chen was, unknowingly, using hypnotic regression techniques that occasionally access the buried memories Elena had protected during the Project Echo procedure. During one session, as Elena was in a relaxed, hypnotic state, fragments of her true memories began to surface. "The White Room," Eleanor mumbled, her voice distant and confused. "The electromagnetic fields, they're changing people's minds." Dr. Chen, thinking this was just trauma from Elena's supposed breakdown, encouraged her to continue. "Tell me about the White Room, Elena." "Project Echo," Elena whispered, and suddenly her eyes snapped open, fully alert. For a brief moment, the real Elena Vasquez was back in control, accessing the memories she'd hidden from the mind control procedure. "Dr. Chen," Elena said urgently, "I need you to listen very carefully. I'm about to tell you something that will sound impossible, but I need you to record it and get it to someone who can help." Over the next 30 minutes, Elena managed to recover and relate fragments of her true memories before the implanted personality reasserted control. Dr. Chen, to her credit, recorded everything and began her own investigation into the claims. What Dr. Chen discovered confirmed Elena's fragmented testimony. The Cognitive Enhancement Institute was indeed conducting memory modification experiments, and Elena Vasquez had been one of their victims. But more disturbing was the evidence that the program was still active, still processing subjects, still building their network of unknowing assets. Dr. Chen contacted investigative journalist Marcus Rivera, who had been looking into rumors of government mind control programs. Together, they began documenting the scope of Project Echo, using Elena's hidden memories as a roadmap to uncover the truth. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showing massive funding from defense contractors and intelligence agencies. Medical records of subjects who had undergone personality changes. Security footage that Dr. Chen managed to obtain showing the procedures Elena had described. But as they prepared to go public with their findings, the watchers closed in again. Dr. Chen was found dead in her office, apparently from a heart attack, though she had no history of cardiac problems. Her files on Project Echo had vanished, and her recording of Elena's testimony had been deleted from all her devices. Marcus Rivera's investigation was shut down when his editor received calls from government officials warning that publication would compromise national security. The evidence they'd gathered was confiscated during a raid on Rivera's apartment, supposedly related to an unrelated tax investigation. And Elena Vasquez? She simply disappeared. The woman who had been calling herself Elena Vasquez was found in her apartment, dead from an apparent suicide. The note she left behind apologized for her paranoid delusions and expressed gratitude for the care she'd received from the Cognitive Enhancement Institute. But those who knew the real Elena Vasquez suspected the truth. The woman who died wasn't the brilliant researcher who had dedicated her life to helping trauma victims. It was the artificial personality that had been implanted to replace her, a construct that had served its purpose and was no longer needed. The real Elena Vasquez, the one who had discovered Project Echo and tried to expose it, had vanished without a trace. Whether she was dead or had been processed through an even more complete personality replacement, no one could say. Project Echo continued its work, more carefully now, with better security protocols and more sophisticated cover stories. The network of modified subjects grew larger, their false memories more convincing, their programmed loyalties more complete. But sometimes, in the digital underground where conspiracy researchers gather, fragments of Dr. Vasquez's evidence still surface. Encrypted files that somehow escaped deletion. Testimony from subjects who occasionally break through their programming. Medical records that document the impossible. The truth about Project Echo remains hidden, protected by layers of classification, and the simple fact that those who try to expose it tend to disappear or suffer convenient accidents. But the evidence exists, scattered across secure servers and hidden in the memories of those who were there. Dr. Elena Vasquez tried to warn us that our memories, our very sense of self, could be rewritten like computer code. She paid the ultimate price for that knowledge, but her message endures. In a world where memories can be modified and personalities can be replaced, how can we ever be sure that our thoughts are truly our own? The most terrifying aspect of Project Echo isn't that it exists, it's that it works so well that its victims never know they've been victimized. Somewhere out there, thousands of people are living false lives, carrying implanted memories, serving interests they don't understand, all while believing their thoughts and experiences are completely authentic. And the rest of us? We can only wonder if the memories we trust, the beliefs we hold, the very sense of who we are, might be nothing more than sophisticated programming, installed by people whose names we'll never know, for purposes we can't imagine. Dr. Elena Vasquez discovered that the human mind, that most private and sacred space, could be invaded, edited, and controlled. She died trying to warn us. The question now is whether anyone is listening, or if we're all too deep in the programming to hear the truth. Sleep well, and remember, if you can trust your memories at all, that some conspiracies are so perfect that their greatest success is convincing us they don't exist. The warehouse security system's early warning alarms pierced the silence at 3:47 a.m., jolting Nova Chen from her restless sleep at her workstation. Red warning lights bathed the converted industrial space as multiple intrusion detection systems triggered simultaneously. She'd been dreaming of encrypted files and population reduction protocols when reality crashed back with the urgency of immediate danger. "Marcus!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the electronic chaos. "We've got company!" Marcus Rodriguez rolled from his sleeping bag in the corner, instantly alert. Years of intelligence training had conditioned him to wake ready for action. He grabbed his go bag, a permanent fixture since his NSA days when paranoia meant survival. "What kind of company?" he asked, pulling on his boots with practiced efficiency. Nova's fingers flew across multiple keyboards as she fought a losing battle against sophisticated network intrusion tools. "Military-grade penetration protocols. Someone's been watching us, and they've got root access to everything." Kai emerged from the back laboratory, purple hair disheveled, but eyes sharp with focus. They'd been analyzing genetic modification patterns when exhaustion finally claimed them. "How long have they been monitoring our network?" "Unknown," Nova admitted, watching helplessly as file after file vanished from their local storage. "But they've seen everything we discovered about Echo Protocol. They're not just infiltrating, they're sanitizing, removing all traces of our research." Professor Aldrich appeared from his makeshift sleeping area, clutching a portable hard drive. At 62, the disgraced virologist had learned not to trust digital storage after his academic career was destroyed for asking inconvenient questions about pandemic preparedness programs. The biological data is backed up offline, he confirmed. If we lose the main servers, we're losing everything, Nova confirmed, her voice tight with controlled panic as their digital fortress crumbled around them. But even as their primary systems fell to the sophisticated attack, Nova's mind raced through backup protocols they'd rehearsed but hoped never to use. Years of preparing for exactly this scenario had taught her to build redundancy into redundancy. Kai, activate the mesh network, she ordered. Marcus, get the satellite uplink operational. We're going distributed. The warehouse transformed as hidden systems came online. What had appeared to be a simple hacker's den revealed itself as a sophisticated intelligence operation. Kai's workstation unfolded into a multi-array communication hub. Marcus produced equipment that definitely hadn't come from civilian sources. Nova's desk revealed concealed servers and independent power systems. Professor, Nova called over the cacophony of alarms. How much of your research exists offline? Everything critical, Aldrich confirmed. I learned not to trust cloud storage after they destroyed my career. As their attackers continued dismantling the main systems, the team executed an evacuation protocol they'd rehearsed countless times. Critical files transferred to multiple secure locations through encrypted channels. Communication pathways shifted to military-grade networks. Physical evidence disappeared into prepared go-bags. But Nova wasn't running. Not yet. Instead, she was doing something that would seem insane to anyone unfamiliar with her particular brand of digital warfare. She was tracing the intrusion back to its source. What are you doing? Marcus demanded, watching her work as alarms continued screaming around them. If they're watching us, Nova said through gritted teeth, then we're watching them back. Her screen filled with network traffic analysis, packet traces, and routing information. The attack was sophisticated, routed through multiple proxy servers and anonymization networks. But sophistication created complexity, and complexity created vulnerabilities. There, she breathed, highlighting a data stream. They're not just stealing our files, they're uploading something. The upload completed just as Nova isolated the data stream, a single file placed carefully in their system logs where forensic analysis would discover it. Child exploitation material. The setup was brilliant in its simplicity. They're framing us, Marcus realized, reading the file metadata. When law enforcement finds this place, we'll be dismissed as criminals instead of researchers. Completely discrediting us, Nova finished, while ensuring no one examines what we actually discovered. But Nova's trace had revealed something else. The real location of their attackers. They weren't operating from some anonymous foreign server farm or underground hacker collective. They're broadcasting from the Genomex Industries building, she announced. Dr. Harrison Vance's company. The same people we watched discussing humanity's extinction 3 hours ago. Kai finished packing their equipment. We need to leave now. But Nova was still working, her fingers moving with desperate speed. She knew this might be their last chance. Not yet. If they're monitoring us in real time, if they know what we've discovered, then they know we're a threat. Which means... Her screen filled with a new data stream. Not an attack this time, but intercepted communications from the Genomex building. They're having an emergency meeting right now, about us. She patched the audio through their speakers, and suddenly the warehouse filled with voices they recognized from their earlier surveillance. Confirmed, they have the Phase 3 documentation, Dr. Vance's voice reported. Complete technical specifications, implementation timelines, biological modification protocols. How is that possible? The WHO director's voice sounded strained. That information is compartmentalized across 17 different security classifications. Unknown, but their research capabilities suggest state-level intelligence resources, came the reply. We may have coordinated opposition. A new voice joined the call. The shadowed figure from their earlier recording, now speaking with urgent authority rather than calm confidence. Irrelevant. They know enough to compromise the entire operation if they go public. We need immediate containment. What kind of containment? Dr. Vance asked. Total. The team, their research, their facility. Make it look like a laboratory accident. Chemical fire, explosion, whatever ensures complete evidence destruction. Nova's blood turned to ice as she realized what they were planning. How long do we have? The WHO director asked. Tactical team is en route, 20 minutes. Nova began shutting down systems, her movements sharp with controlled panic. We're blown. They're sending a kill team. 20 minutes, Kai checked their watch. That's not enough time to... It's enough time to do one thing, Nova interrupted, pulling up her final contingency protocol. We can't save ourselves, but we can save the evidence. She began uploading their complete research archive to a decentralized network, blockchain-based storage systems that couldn't be deleted or controlled by any single authority. But the upload was massive, and their internet connection was already compromised. Upload time, 17 minutes, her system reported. 3 minutes to spare, Marcus said grimly, checking his weapons. But as if summoned by his words, new alarms began screaming. Motion sensors around the warehouse perimeter detected multiple vehicles approaching from different directions. They lied about the timeline, Nova realized. The team is already here. Through the grimy windows, they could see black SUVs surrounding the building. Tactical lights swept across the walls. Radio chatter echoed from outside. Professional, coordinated, lethal. Upload progress, 32%, her computer announced. Nova looked at her team, her friends, her fellow travelers in the digital underground. Kai with their fierce intelligence and boundless optimism. Marcus with his warrior's honor and protective instincts. Professor Aldrich with his scientist's dedication to truth above comfort. I need 8 more minutes to finish the upload, she said quietly. Can you give me 8 minutes? Marcus checked his rifle, the same model he'd carried during his government service. Against a professional tactical team in an indefensible position, he looked around the warehouse that had been their home, their sanctuary, their last stand. Yeah, he said finally. We can give you 8 minutes. As the first breaching charges exploded against the warehouse doors, Nova's fingers continued dancing across her keyboard, uploading humanity's final testimony to the digital wind. Outside, boots pounded against concrete and orders were shouted in tactical communication protocols. Inside, 4 people who had stumbled across the end of the world fought to ensure someone, somewhere, would know what really happened to the human race. The upload bar crawled toward completion, 47%, 48%, 59%, and in the distance, sirens wailed, though whether they were coming to help or to clean up the mess, nobody could tell. The warehouse's early warning system starts screaming at 4:17 a.m., 3 hours after they finished analyzing the intercepted conference call. Nova jolts awake from her desk, where she'd fallen asleep reviewing genetic modification patents. The screens around her flash red as multiple intrusion detection systems trigger simultaneously. Lynx, she shouts, adrenaline cutting through exhaustion. We've got company. Lynx rolls out of his sleeping bag, grabbing his laptop and a go bag he keeps permanently packed. Old habits from his intelligence days. What kind of company? The kind that uses military-grade network penetration tools, Nova responds, her fingers flying across keyboards as she tries to lock down their systems. Someone's been watching us. Jax appears from the back room, purple hair messy from sleep, but their eyes sharp with focus. How long have they been in our network? Unknown, Nova admits, fighting a losing battle against the intrusion. But they've got root access to our communication systems. They've seen everything. Kale emerges from his makeshift lab, clutching a hard drive. I've backed up all the biological data to an isolated system. If we lose the main servers, we're losing everything. Nova confirms, watching as file after file disappears from their local storage. They're not just infiltrating, they're sanitizing, removing all traces of what we've found. But even as their digital fortress crumbles around them, Nova's mind races ahead to their backup protocols. Years of paranoia have taught her to prepare for exactly this scenario. Jax, activate the mesh network. Lynx, get the satellite uplink ready. We're going distributed. The warehouse transforms as hidden systems come online. What appeared to be a simple hacker den reveals itself as a sophisticated intelligence operation. Jax's workstation unfolds into a multi-array communication hub. Lynx produces equipment that definitely didn't come from civilian sources. Nova's desk reveals hidden servers and backup power systems. "Professor," Nova calls, "how much of your research is stored offline?" "Everything critical," Kale confirms. "I learned not to trust cloud storage after they destroyed my academic career." As their attackers continue dismantling their main systems, the team executes an evacuation protocol they've rehearsed but hoped never to use. Critical files transfer to multiple secure locations. Communication channels shift to encrypted networks. Physical evidence gets packed into go bags. But Nova isn't running yet. Instead, she's doing something that would seem insane to anyone who doesn't understand her particular brand of digital warfare. She's tracing the intrusion back to its source. "What are you doing?" Lynx demands, watching her work as alarms continue screaming around them. "If they're watching us," Nova says through gritted teeth, "then we're watching them back." Her screen fills with network traffic analysis, packet traces, and routing information. The attack is sophisticated, routed through multiple proxy servers and anonymization networks. But sophistication creates complexity, and complexity creates vulnerabilities. "There," she breathes, highlighting a data stream. "They're not just stealing our files, they're uploading something." The upload completes just as Nova isolates the data stream, a single file placed carefully in their system logs where it would be discovered during any forensic analysis. Child pornography, Lynx realizes, reading the file metadata. They're setting us up. When law enforcement finds this place, we'll be dismissed as perverts and criminals instead of researchers. "Brilliant," Nova finishes. "Completely discredit us while making sure no one looks too closely at what we actually found." But Nova's trace has revealed something else, the real location of their attackers. And it's not some anonymous hacker collective or foreign government. They're operating out of the Protein Core building, she announces. Dr. Harrison Vale's company, the same people we watched discussing humanity's extinction 3 hours ago. Jax finishes packing their equipment. "We need to leave now." But Nova is still working, her fingers moving with the desperate speed of someone who knows this might be their last chance. Not yet. If they're monitoring us in real time, if they know what we've discovered, then they know we're a threat, which means... Her screen fills with a new data stream. Not an attack this time, but intercepted communications from the Protein Core building. They're having an emergency meeting, she realizes, right now. About us. She patches the audio through their speakers, and suddenly the warehouse fills with voices they recognize from the earlier recording. Confirmed, they have the Phase 3 documentation, Dr. Vale's voice reports. Full technical specifications, implementation timelines, biological modification protocols. How is that possible? The WHO director's voice sounds strained. That information is compartmentalized across 17 different security classifications. Unknown, but their research capabilities suggest state-level intelligence resources. We may have a coordinated opposition. A new voice joins the call. The shadowed figure from the earlier recording, though now speaking with urgent authority rather than calm confidence. Irrelevant. They know enough to compromise the entire operation if they go public. We need immediate containment. What kind of containment? Dr. Vale asks. Total. The team, their research, their facility. Make it look like a lab accident. Chemical fire, explosion, whatever ensures complete evidence destruction. Nova's blood turns to ice as she realizes what they're planning. How long do we have? The WHO director asks. Tactical team is en route. 20 minutes. Nova starts shutting down systems, her movements sharp with controlled panic. We're blown. They're sending a kill team. 20 minutes. Jax checks their watch. That's not enough time to... It's enough time to do one thing, Nova interrupts, pulling up her final contingency protocol. We can't save ourselves, but we can save the evidence. She begins uploading their complete research archive to a decentralized network. Blockchain-based storage systems that can't be deleted or controlled by any single authority. But the upload is massive, and their internet connection is already compromised. Upload time, 17 minutes, her system reports. 3 minutes to spare, Lynx says grimly, checking his weapons if their timeline is accurate. But as if summoned by his words, new alarms start screaming. Motion sensors around the warehouse perimeter. Thermal imaging detecting multiple vehicles approaching from different directions. They lied about the timeline, Nova realizes. The team is already here. Through the grimy windows, they can see black SUVs surrounding the building. Tactical lights sweep across the walls. Radio chatter echoes from outside. Professional, coordinated, lethal. Upload progress, 32%, her computer announces. Nova looks at her team, her friends, her fellow travelers in the digital underground. Jax with their fierce intelligence and boundless optimism. Lynx with his warrior's honor and protective instincts. Kale with his scientist's dedication to truth above comfort. I need 8 more minutes to finish the upload, she says quietly. Can you give me 8 minutes? Lynx checks his rifle, the same model he carried during his government service, against a professional tactical team in an indefensible position. He looks around the warehouse, their home, their sanctuary, their last stand. Yeah, he says finally, we can give you 8 minutes. As the first breaching charges explode against the warehouse doors, Nova's fingers continue dancing across her keyboard, uploading humanity's final testimony to the digital wind. Outside, boots pound against concrete and orders are shouted in tactical shorthand. Inside, 4 people who stumbled across the end of the world fight to make sure someone, somewhere, will know what really happened to the human race. The upload bar crawls toward completion. 47%, 48%, 50%, and in the distance, sirens wail. Though whether they're coming to help or to clean up the mess, nobody can tell. The warehouse's emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows as Dr. Elena Vasquez fought against the restraints binding her to the metal chair. Around her, Project Echo's control room hummed with sophisticated monitoring equipment, its screens displaying real-time readouts of her neural activity. The integration process is proceeding ahead of schedule, reported Dr. Harrison Vale, his voice carrying the clinical detachment of someone who had long ago abandoned any pretense of medical ethics. Subject shows remarkable resistance to standard memory suppression protocols. Elena's vision blurred as another wave of electromagnetic pulses coursed through the neural interface crown they'd forced onto her head. The device was a masterwork of covert technology, designed to rewrite human consciousness at the most fundamental level. But something was wrong with their calculations. Neural pathway reconstruction at 67%, announced a technician, his fingers dancing across holographic displays. But we're detecting anomalous feedback loops in sectors 7 through 12. Dr. Vale frowned, studying the cascading data streams. Elena wasn't just resisting the conditioning protocols, she was somehow reversing them, using her neuroscience expertise to turn their own weapons against the system. Increase theta wave modulation, Vale ordered. Full spectrum emotional suppression. We cannot allow her retained memories to contaminate the implanted identity matrix. Through the haze of technological assault on her mind, Elena glimpsed the true scope of Project Echo. Wall-mounted displays showed surveillance feeds from across the globe, subjects living ordinary lives, unaware that their thoughts, emotions, and decisions were being subtly guided by embedded neural programming. Businessmen making investment choices that served hidden agendas, politicians crafting legislation that advanced shadow objectives, journalists unconsciously steering public opinion toward predetermined narratives. The program had evolved far beyond simple mind control. It was social engineering on a planetary scale, using human consciousness itself as the medium for manipulation. Memory integration failure in cognitive sectors 9 and 10, the technician reported with growing alarm. She's accessing suppressed data from the conditioning archive. Elena's awareness suddenly expanded beyond the confines of her physical form. The neural interface, designed to impose foreign thoughts and memories, had instead become a gateway into Project Echo's central database. She could see the program's entire structure, not just the subjects, but the handlers, the funding sources, the ultimate architects of humanity's invisible chains. The revelation was staggering. Echo wasn't a government program at all, but a collaborative effort between intelligence agencies, multinational corporations, and entities whose true nature remained classified beyond her security clearance. They were preparing for something called Phase Omega, a final implementation that would bring the majority of human consciousness under direct centralized control. "Containment breach," shouted another technician, as Elena's biometric readings spiked beyond safe parameters. Neural feedback is cascading through the primary interface network. Dr. Vale stepped forward, his face pale with the realization of what was happening. She's not just accessing our data, she's downloading it. Shut down the interface immediately. But it was too late. Elena's consciousness had become a conduit, pulling terabytes of classified information through the neural link and storing it in the quantum structures of her own memory. The very technology designed to erase her knowledge had instead made her a repository for Project Echo's deepest secrets. Alarms blared throughout the facility as automated security protocols engaged. Emergency blast doors sealed the chamber, while containment teams mobilized to prevent any breach of classified information. But the real damage had already been done, not to the facility, but to the careful isolation that had protected the program's existence. "Initiate Lazarus Protocol," Vale commanded, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Complete neural restructuring, wipe everything, and start from baseline consciousness." The Lazarus Protocol was Project Echo's ultimate fail-safe, a complete dissolution of human personality, followed by reconstruction from archived behavioral templates. It had never been tested on a subject with Elena's level of neural integration, and the risks were catastrophic. As the system powered up for the final assault on her consciousness, Elena made a desperate gambit. Using her newfound access to the facility's networks, she triggered a cascade failure in the containment systems while simultaneously broadcasting a compressed data burst to every connected device within the installation's communication range. The explosion that followed wasn't physical, but informational. A digital shockwave that carried fragments of Project Echo's classified archives across multiple networks before the facility's communication blackout could take effect. In the chaos of the system failure, Elena's restraints disengaged, and she collapsed to the floor as the neural interface crown sparked and died. But her victory was Pyrrhic. The Lazarus Protocol had partially activated before the system crash, leaving her memories fractured and incomplete. She retained fragments of Project Echo's structure, but not enough to expose the full scope of the conspiracy. Worse, the neural trauma had left her with gaps in her personal identity. She could remember her scientific expertise, but not the faces of her family. Could recall her investigation into the program, but not the names of her allies. As security teams stormed the compromised chamber, Eleanor stumbled through emergency corridors, guided by training she couldn't remember receiving. The facility's layout seemed familiar, despite her certainty that she'd never been here before, suggesting that her conditioning had begun long before her apparent capture. She emerged into the pre-dawn darkness of what appeared to be an industrial complex, disguised as a research campus. The signs identified it as Meridian Biosciences, a legitimate pharmaceutical company that served as cover for Project Echo's operations. But Eleanor's fragmented memories suggested this was only one of dozens of facilities worldwide, each contributing pieces to a puzzle too vast for any single person to comprehend. The data burst she transmitted during her escape began propagating through digital networks, but Project Echo's countermeasures were swift and sophisticated. Within hours, the leaked information was being systematically purged from servers and databases, while disinformation campaigns flooded online channels with false documents designed to discredit any authentic revelations. Elena found temporary refuge in a 24-hour diner, using a public computer terminal to search for traces of her own leaked intelligence. What she discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. The information had reached certain individuals before the purge began, but those same individuals were now disappearing or dying in apparent accidents. The program's reach extended far beyond what she had initially suspected. Project Echo wasn't just manipulating subjects, it was actively defending itself through a network of embedded assets who might not even realize they were serving its agenda. Every law enforcement officer who dismissed reports of strange behavior, every journalist who chose not to investigate suspicious patterns, every politician who voted against oversight measures. How many were acting on their own judgment, and how many were following implanted directives? As Eleanor sat in the diner, struggling to piece together her fractured memories, she became aware of other patrons whose behavior seemed subtly wrong. A businessman reading a newspaper while his eyes tracked her movements. A waitress who refilled coffee cups in a pattern that kept her within earshot of Elena's table. A maintenance worker who had been repairing the same outlet for 30 minutes. They were all watching her, but their surveillance felt automatic, unconscious. These weren't trained operatives, but ordinary people whose conditioning had activated in response to her presence. Project Echo had turned random civilians into an invisible monitoring network. Elena left the diner and began walking, testing her theory. At each location she visited, a library, a shopping mall, a park, she noticed the same pattern. Certain individuals would unconsciously orient themselves to maintain visual contact with her, their movements coordinated despite showing no signs of conscious communication. The realization was chilling. Project Echo hadn't just created sleeper agents, it had created a society where surveillance was distributed among the general population. The program's subjects weren't just politicians and business leaders, but ordinary citizens whose minor behavioral modifications contributed to a vast intelligence-gathering apparatus. By evening, Elena had identified 17 individuals who appeared to be unconsciously monitoring her activities. But more disturbing was her growing suspicion that she too might be following embedded programming. Her escape route from the facility had been almost too smooth, her evasion tactics too sophisticated for someone with no apparent training in such matters. What if her escape had been orchestrated? What if she was meant to discover the surveillance network, meant to uncover certain aspects of Project Echo while remaining blind to others? The very thoughts she was thinking might be the product of carefully implanted cognitive pathways designed to lead her toward predetermined conclusions. This was the true genius of the program, not just the ability to control what people did, but to control what they thought they had discovered through their own investigation. Elena might believe she was exposing Project Echo, when in reality, she was unknowingly following a script designed to reveal certain truths while concealing deeper ones. As night fell, Eleanor found herself standing before a mirror in a public restroom, studying her own reflection with growing unease. The face looking back at her was familiar, but somehow foreign, as if she was seeing herself through someone else's eyes. How much of her personality was authentically her own, and how much had been constructed by the program? The neural conditioning might have failed to completely erase her memories, but it had succeeded in something perhaps more insidious. It had made her doubt the very nature of her own thoughts and motivations. Every decision she made, every plan she formulated, every emotion she felt could be the product of technological manipulation rather than genuine human experience. In the distance, she could hear sirens, whether coming for her or responding to some unrelated emergency. She couldn't be sure. But the sound triggered a cascade of fragmented memories, laboratory corridors, restraint chairs, the faces of other subjects who had undergone similar procedures. Some looked grateful for their conditioning, relieved to have their anxieties and uncertainties replaced with calm certainty. Others showed the hollow emptiness of personalities that had been completely overwritten. Eleanor realized she occupied a middle ground between these extremes, partially conditioned but not completely controlled, aware of the manipulation, but uncertain of its full extent. She was a living experiment in the boundaries of human consciousness, a test case for Project Echo's most advanced techniques. The question that haunted her as she disappeared into the anonymous crowds of the city was whether her resistance to the conditioning was genuine or whether it too was part of the program's design. In a world where reality itself could be technologically mediated, how could anyone be certain that their thoughts were truly their own? The answer, Elena suspected, lay not in the memories she had recovered, but in the ones that remained missing, the gaps in her consciousness that might contain the most crucial revelations about Project Echo's ultimate objectives. To find the truth, she would have to venture even deeper into the labyrinth of technological manipulation, risking not just her life, but the very essence of her identity. But first, she needed to find others like herself, subjects who had partially escaped the conditioning but retained fragments of authentic memory. Together, they might be able to piece together enough of the truth to expose Project Echo before Phase Omega could be implemented. The hunt for her fellow survivors would begin tomorrow. Tonight, Elena would rest and prepare for a battle that would be fought not with weapons, but with the most fundamental questions of human consciousness. What makes us who we are? How do we distinguish between authentic thoughts and implanted ones? And in a world where reality can be programmed, how do we recognize the difference between liberation and a more sophisticated form of control? As she settled into a cheap motel room paid for with cash, Eleanor's last conscious thought before sleep was a fragment of recovered memory. A voice from the laboratory saying, "The most effective conditioning is the kind that makes subjects believe they are acting according to their own free will." She closed her eyes, wondering if even her resistance was exactly what they wanted her to feel. Dr. Helena Vasquez stood in the sterile white laboratory, adjusting the electromagnetic field generator one final time. The subject in the chair before her was breathing steadily, electrodes monitoring every neural pathway as the machine hummed to life. This was Project Echo, the most classified program in modern intelligence history, and she was about to witness something that would fundamentally alter her understanding of human consciousness. The official designation was cognitive behavioral modification research, but everyone involved knew what they were really doing. They were creating perfect human assets, individuals whose memories could be selectively edited, whose personalities could be precisely calibrated, whose loyalty could be programmed at the neurological level. The technology had evolved far beyond the crude experiments of previous decades, incorporating advances in neuroscience, electromagnetic manipulation, and pharmaceutical intervention that bordered on science fiction. Helena had joined the program believing she was contributing to breakthrough treatments for trauma victims. The initial briefings spoke of helping soldiers overcome PTSD, of erasing the psychological scars that prevented veterans from reintegrating into society. Noble goals that masked a darker reality she was only beginning to comprehend. The subject today was designated Alpha 7, a volunteer recruited through a medical research program that promised cutting-edge treatment for chronic anxiety. What Alpha 7 didn't know was that her anxiety was artificially induced, a side effect of preliminary conditioning designed to make her more receptive to the deeper modifications they were about to attempt. Helena initiated the sequence, watching as brainwave patterns shifted on her monitors. The electromagnetic field would temporarily disrupt the subject's hippocampus, while targeted pharmaceuticals created a neurochemical environment conducive to memory manipulation. During this window of vulnerability, carefully crafted false memories would be implanted while genuine recollections were selectively suppressed. The process was elegant in its precision. Unlike the brutal methods of earlier programs that left subjects obviously damaged, Echo's techniques were subtle enough that the modifications felt natural. Subjects retained their core personalities, while specific thoughts, loyalties, and behavioral patterns were quietly rewritten. They would wake up feeling refreshed, perhaps slightly disoriented, but essentially themselves. The changes would manifest gradually over the following weeks, as the new programming integrated with their existing neural architecture. But as Helena monitored the readouts, something began to feel wrong. The subject's neural responses were following the expected patterns, but there were anomalies in the quantum field measurements, fluctuations that suggested the modifications weren't just affecting the subject's brain, but somehow resonating beyond the confines of the laboratory. She'd been noticing these irregularities for weeks now, always in the moments when the deepest programming was being installed. It was as if the consciousness itself was more malleable than they'd understood. Not just a product of neural chemistry, but something that could be influenced across distances that defied conventional physics. Helena made careful notes, documenting the anomalies while maintaining the appearance of routine compliance. She was beginning to suspect that Project Echo was not just modifying individual minds, but potentially affecting consciousness on a broader scale. The implications were staggering and terrifying. After the session concluded and Alpha 7 was taken to recovery, Helena remained in the laboratory, reviewing her data. The patterns were undeniable. Each successful modification created ripple effects that extended far beyond the subject, subtle influences that seemed to propagate through what could only be described as a collective unconscious. Over the following days, Helena began her own covert investigation. She accessed classified files, cross-referenced subject data with population statistics, and slowly assembled a picture that challenged everything she thought she knew about the nature of human consciousness and the true scope of Project Echo. The program wasn't just creating individual assets, it was conducting experiments in mass psychological manipulation, using selected subjects as nodes in a network that could influence broader populations. Every person who underwent echo modification became a transmitter, unconsciously broadcasting behavioral suggestions to those around them. Helena realized she was witnessing the development of a technology that could reshape society itself, one mind at a time. The question was whether she had the courage to expose what she'd discovered, knowing that doing so would make her a target of the very forces she was investigating. As she prepared to document her findings, Helena couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her, that her investigation had already been noticed by those who preferred their secrets remain buried. The next phase of her journey would require her to disappear into the underground networks of researchers and whistleblowers, who understood that some truths were too dangerous for official channels. The battle for human consciousness was about to begin, and Helena Vasquez had just chosen her side. The warehouse's early warning system starts screaming at 4:17 a.m., 3 hours after they finished analyzing the intercepted conference call. Nova jolts awake from her desk, where she'd fallen asleep reviewing genetic modification patents. The screens around her flash red as multiple intrusion detection systems trigger simultaneously. "Lynx!" she shouts, adrenaline cutting through exhaustion. "We've got company!" Lynx rolls out of his sleeping bag, grabbing his laptop and a go bag he keeps permanently packed. Old habits from his intelligence days. What kind of company? The kind that uses military-grade network penetration tools, Nova responds, her fingers flying across keyboards as she tries to lock down their systems. "Someone's been watching us." Jax appears from the back room, purple hair messy from sleep, but their eyes sharp with focus. "How long have they been in our network?" "Unknown," Nova admits, fighting a losing battle against the intrusion. "But they've got root access to our communication systems. They've seen everything." Kale emerges from his makeshift lab, clutching a hard drive. "I've backed up all the biological data to an isolated system. If we lose the main servers..." "We're losing everything," Nova confirms, watching as file after file disappears from their local storage. They're not just infiltrating, they're sanitizing, removing all traces of what we've found. But even as their digital fortress crumbles around them, Nova's mind races ahead to their backup protocols. Years of paranoia have taught her to prepare for exactly this scenario. Jax, activate the mesh network. Lynx, get the satellite uplink ready. We're going distributed. The warehouse transforms as hidden systems come online. What appeared to be a simple hacker den reveals itself as a sophisticated intelligence operation. Jax's workstation unfolds into a multi-array communication hub. Lynx produces equipment that definitely didn't come from civilian sources. Nova's desk reveals hidden servers and backup power systems. "Professor," Nova calls, "how much of your research is stored offline?" "Everything critical," Kale confirms. "I learned not to trust cloud storage after they destroyed my academic career." As their attackers continue dismantling their main systems, the team executes an evacuation protocol they've rehearsed but hoped never to use. Critical files transfer to multiple secure locations. Communication channels shift to encrypted networks. Physical evidence gets packed into go bags. But Nova isn't running yet. Instead, she's doing something that would seem insane to anyone who doesn't understand her particular brand of digital warfare. She's tracing the intrusion back to its source. "What are you doing?" Lynx demands, watching her work as alarms continue screaming around them. "If they're watching us," Nova says through gritted teeth, "then we're watching them back." Her screen fills with network traffic analysis, packet traces, and routing information. The attack is sophisticated, routed through multiple proxy servers and anonymization networks. But sophistication creates complexity, and complexity creates vulnerabilities. "There," she breathes, highlighting a data stream. "They're not just stealing our files, they're uploading something." The upload completes just as Nova isolates the data stream. A single file, placed carefully in their system logs where it would be discovered during any forensic analysis. Child pornography, Lynx realizes, reading the file metadata. They're setting us up. When law enforcement finds this place, we'll be dismissed as perverts and criminals instead of researchers. "Brilliant," Nova finishes. "Completely discredit us while making sure no one looks too closely at what we actually found." But Nova's trace has revealed something else. The real location of their attackers. And it's not some anonymous hacker collective or foreign government. They're operating out of the Protein Core building, she announces. Dr. Harrison Vale's company. The same people we watched discussing humanity's extinction 3 hours ago. Jax finishes packing their equipment. "We need to leave now." But Nova is still working. Her fingers moving with the desperate speed of someone who knows this might be their last chance. Not yet. If they're monitoring us in real time, if they know what we've discovered, then they know we're a threat. Which means Her screen fills with a new data stream. Not an attack this time, but intercepted communications from the protein core building. They're having an emergency meeting, she realizes, right now, about us. She patches the audio through their speakers, and suddenly the warehouse fills with voices they recognize from the earlier recording. Confirmed they have the Phase 3 documentation, Dr. Vale's voice reports. Full technical specifications, implementation timelines, biological modification protocols. How is that possible? The WHO director's voice sounds strained. That information is compartmentalized across 17 different security classifications. Unknown, but their research capabilities suggest state-level intelligence resources. We may have a coordinated opposition. A new voice joins the call. The shadowed figure from the earlier recording, though now speaking with urgent authority rather than calm confidence. Irrelevant. They know enough to compromise the entire operation if they go public. We need immediate containment. What kind of containment? Dr. Vale asks. Total. The team, their research, their facility. Make it look like a lab accident. Chemical fire, explosion, whatever ensures complete evidence destruction. Nova's blood turns to ice as she realizes what they're planning. How long do we have? The WHO director asks. Tactical team is en route. 20 minutes. Nova starts shutting down systems, her movements sharp with controlled panic. We're blown. They're sending a kill team. 20 minutes. Jax checks their watch. That's not enough time to... It's enough time to do one thing, Nova interrupts, pulling up her final contingency protocol. We can't save ourselves, but we can save the evidence. She begins uploading their complete research archive to a decentralized network. Blockchain-based storage systems that can't be deleted or controlled by any single authority. But the upload is massive, and their internet connection is already compromised. Upload time, 17 minutes, her system reports. 3 minutes to spare, Lynx says grimly, checking his weapons. If their timeline is accurate, but as if summoned by his words, new alarms start screaming. Motion sensors around the warehouse perimeter. Thermal imaging detecting multiple vehicles approaching from different directions. They lied about the timeline, Nova realizes. The team is already here. Through the grimy windows, they can see black SUVs surrounding the building. Tactical lights sweep across the walls. Radio chatter echoes from outside. Professional, coordinated, lethal. Upload progress, 32%, her computer announces. Nova looks at her team, her friends, her fellow travelers in the digital underground. Jax with their fierce intelligence and boundless optimism. Lynx with his warrior's honor and protective instincts. Kale with his scientist's dedication to truth above comfort. I need 8 more minutes to finish the upload, she says quietly. Can you give me 8 minutes? Lynx checks his rifle, the same model he carried during his government service, against a professional tactical team in an indefensible position. He looks around the warehouse, their home, their sanctuary, their last stand. Yeah, he says finally. We can give you 8 minutes. As the first breaching charges explode against the warehouse doors, Nova's fingers continue dancing across her keyboard, uploading humanity's final testimony to the digital wind. Outside, boots pound against concrete and orders are shouted in tactical shorthand. Inside, 4 people who stumbled across the end of the world fight to make sure someone, somewhere, will know what really happened to the human race. The upload bar crawls toward completion. 47%, 48%, 49%. And in the distance, sirens wail, though whether they're coming to help or to clean up the mess, nobody can tell. The warehouse's emergency power died at 3:47 a.m., plunging the facility into absolute darkness, broken only by the pale glow of battery-powered equipment and the muzzle flashes of automatic weapons. Nova Chen's fingers moved across her keyboard with mechanical precision. The upload progress bar crawling toward completion even as concrete dust rained down from bullet impacts above her head. 67%, she called out, her voice steady, despite the chaos erupting around their makeshift command center. The files containing the complete Project Echo documentation were transmitting to 17 different secure servers across 4 continents. Each packet of data, another nail in the coffin of humanity's most carefully guarded secret. Lynx Rodriguez ejected an empty magazine, his movements fluid despite the blood seeping through his tactical vest. Former NSA operatives don't forget their training, even after crossing to the other side. "How much longer?" he shouted over the sound of breaching charges echoing through the warehouse's upper levels. 3 minutes, Nova replied, rerouting the transmission through backup satellite links as their primary connections suffered targeted electromagnetic interference. They'd prepared for this moment, knowing that Project Echo's guardians would eventually trace their investigation back to its source. Professor Kale crouched behind an overturned server rack, clutching the backup drives that contained decades of suppressed research into biological modification programs. At 68, he'd thought his days of running from government assassins were behind him. The irony wasn't lost on him that his final stand would be defending the truth about the very programs that had destroyed his academic career. Jax Morrison worked frantically at their communication station, fingers dancing across multiple keyboards as they maintained contact with their distributed network of researchers, journalists, and activists. Purple hair matted with sweat and plaster dust, they looked more like a cyberpunk warrior than a 23-year-old data analyst who'd stumbled onto the conspiracy of the century. Tactical teams breaching the perimeter, Jax reported, monitoring security feeds from cameras they'd hidden throughout the industrial complex. Multiple entry points, coordinated assault. These aren't local law enforcement. Black operations, Lynx confirmed, recognizing the movement patterns on the screens. Same units that disappeared Dr. Elena Vasquez and her research team. They're not here to arrest us. The transmission progress bar reached 74% as the first breaching charge detonated on the warehouse's main entrance. The reinforced door held, but Nova could see stress fractures spreading across its surface like spider webs. Their defensive preparations had bought them time, but not much. "Upload status?" Professor Kale asked, checking the remaining ammunition in his borrowed sidearm. For a man who'd spent his career studying viruses in sterile laboratory environments, he'd adapted remarkably well to their current circumstances. 79%, Nova answered, her concentration absolute as she monitored data streams, server responses, and network integrity. Years of experience in digital warfare had taught her that the final 20% of any critical upload was where everything could go wrong. Servers could crash, connections could fail, or in this case, electromagnetic pulse weapons could fry every piece of electronic equipment in a 3-block radius. The warehouse's secondary entrance exploded inward, sending a shower of metal fragments across the workspace. Dark-clad figures poured through the breach, their movements coordinated and professional. These weren't the typical government agents who handled conventional classified material leaks. These were specialists, trained in what intelligence agencies euphemistically called permanent problem resolution. Lynx opened fire from his position behind a reinforced concrete pillar, his shots precise and economical. Each muzzle flash illuminated tactical gear that didn't appear in any official military catalogue. Weapon systems that seemed several generations ahead of standard issue equipment. 86%, Nova announced, her voice carrying a note of desperate hope. The upload was entering its final phase, distributing across mirror sites that would make complete suppression virtually impossible. Even if they were killed in the next few minutes, the truth about Project Echo would survive. Professor Kale moved to cover Jax as they worked to maintain their communication links. The old scientist's hands were steady as he returned fire, muscle memory from long-forgotten military service taking over. "How many people are going to see this?" he called out between shots. "Millions," Jax replied without looking up from their screens. "I've seeded the files across every major whistleblower platform, academic network, and social media system I can access. By morning, half the internet will have copies." The tactical team advanced with professional efficiency, using coordinated fire and movement to systematically clear the warehouse. But Nova's team had chosen their defensive position well. The converted server room offered multiple angles of cover and limited approaches for attackers. 91%, Nova reported, sweat beading on her forehead as she watched the progress indicator. So close now. The files contained everything they'd discovered about Project Echo. The memory modification protocols, the biological enhancement programs, the network of facilities where subjects were processed and deployed, and most damning of all, the complete list of assets currently operating under false identities throughout society. A figure in tactical gear appeared at the server room's entrance, weapon raised. Lynx's shot took him center mass, but two more immediately moved to flank their position. The warehouse filled with the sharp crack of automatic weapons fire and the acrid smell of cordite. "Upload completion in 60 seconds, Nova called out, her fingers flying across backup interfaces as primary systems began failing under electromagnetic attack. The enemy had deployed signal jamming equipment, but their distributed transmission protocol was designed to route around such interference. Jax suddenly jerked backward, a red stain spreading across their shoulder. "Hit," they gasped, but continued working with one hand while pressing the other against the wound. Maintaining communication links, Professor Kale moved to provide covering fire, his academic's face set in grim determination. "We've come too far to fail now," he muttered, squeezing off careful shots at advancing tactical personnel. The warehouse's emergency lighting failed completely, plunging them into darkness broken only by weapon flashes and the pale blue glow of computer screens. In the intermittent illumination, Nova could see that their attackers had night vision equipment, giving them a significant tactical advantage. 97%, she announced, her voice carrying across the chaos. The final data packets were transmitting, containing the most sensitive intelligence about Project Echo's current operations and future plans. A new sound cut through the gunfire, the distinctive whine of an electromagnetic pulse weapon charging. Nova recognized it from her research into electronic warfare systems. In 30 seconds, every piece of electronic equipment in the warehouse would be permanently disabled. "EMP weapon charging," Lynx shouted, recognizing the threat. "They're going scorched earth." Nova's hands moved with desperate speed, implementing final backup protocols. If the upload didn't complete in the next 20 seconds, months of investigation and preparation would be lost. Worse, the truth about humanity's secret enslavement would remain buried. 99%, she reported, watching the final few megabytes of data stream across satellite links to secure servers around the world. The electromagnetic pulse weapon's whine grew louder, indicating imminent discharge. The warehouse erupted in blinding white light as the EMP weapon fired. Every screen went dark, every computer died, every piece of electronic equipment became an expensive paperweight. In the sudden silence that followed, broken only by the settling of debris and the distant sound of sirens, Nova Chen smiled. The upload had completed 3 seconds before the pulse hit. Across the globe, servers began receiving and redistributing the Project Echo files. Journalists' phones buzzed with notifications about massive data drops. Activists found their secure communication channels flooded with documentation of government mind control programs. Academic researchers discovered their email inboxes filled with evidence of biological modification experiments that violated every principle of medical ethics. The tactical team moved through the darkened warehouse, checking bodies with professional thoroughness. They found Nova Chen slumped over her keyboard, Lynx Rodriguez sprawled behind his concrete pillar, and Professor Kale collapsed near the server racks. Only Jax Morrison showed signs of life, breathing shallowly as blood pooled beneath their wounded shoulder. The team leader, a figure whose face remained hidden behind tactical goggles and communications gear, surveyed the scene with cold efficiency. Containment failed, he reported into his encrypted radio. Files were transmitted before EMP deployment. Recommend immediate implementation of Scenario 7. The response came through his earpiece in a voice that carried the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected millions of lives. Scenario 7 authorized. Clean up the scene and prepare for media management protocols. We're going to need a cover story that explains away everything they just released. As the tactical team began their sanitization procedures, none of them noticed the small red light blinking on Jax Morrison's hidden body camera, still transmitting through a shielded connection to a cellular network that had been specifically hardened against electromagnetic interference. Even in defeat, Nova's team had planned for contingencies. The final transmission wasn't data files or research documents. It was 47 minutes of real-time footage showing government operatives executing civilians to protect classified programs. The kind of evidence that couldn't be dismissed as elaborate hoaxes or foreign propaganda. By dawn, the warehouse fire that consumed the building would be front-page news. The official story would describe a tragic accident involving homeless squatters and improperly stored chemicals. The tactical team would have vanished without a trace, their existence denied by every government agency that might have deployed them. But the internet would remember everything. The Project Echo files would multiply across servers and peer-to-peer networks, faster than any censorship system could track them. The body camera footage would appear on platforms that didn't cooperate with government takedown requests, and in chat rooms, forums, and encrypted messaging apps around the world, people would begin connecting dots that powerful interests had spent decades keeping separate. The age of uncontrolled information had arrived, and humanity's secret controllers were about to discover that some truths were too large to contain. 3 months later, congressional hearings would begin. Government officials would resign in disgrace. Corporate executives would face criminal charges. And in a small cemetery outside the city, 4 headstones would mark the graves of researchers who had given their lives to expose the greatest conspiracy in human history. Their names: Nova Chen, Lynx Rodriguez, Jax Morrison, and Professor Kale. Their epitaph, carved in simple stone. They found the code that wasn't meant to be found. The truth had set humanity free, but freedom, as always, had come at a price. In the summer of 2019, Dr. Elena Vasquez thought she was joining a routine psychological research program. The recruitment email had been straightforward enough. A study on stress response and cognitive enhancement techniques, funded by a consortium of medical institutions and offering substantial compensation for her expertise in neuroscience. What she discovered in the sterile corridors of the Meridian Research Institute would shatter everything she believed about the boundaries of human consciousness and the price of knowledge. The facility sat on 40 acres of manicured grounds outside Bethesda, Maryland, its sleek glass exterior reflecting nothing but blue sky and carefully maintained landscaping. Dr. Vasquez arrived on a Monday morning in June, her credentials impeccable and her expectations modest. She had spent the previous decade studying neural plasticity at Johns Hopkins, publishing papers on memory formation and cognitive rehabilitation. This consulting position promised a change of pace and the opportunity to work with cutting-edge technology. Her orientation began in Conference Room C, a windowless space where she met Dr. Marcus Webb, the project director. Webb was a tall man in his 50s with greying temples and the kind of measured confidence that comes from years of managing sensitive research. He explained that Project Echo was investigating advanced techniques for memory enhancement and cognitive optimization, with potential applications in treating trauma and neurodegenerative diseases. "We're exploring the malleability of human consciousness," Webb told her, his voice carrying the enthusiasm of a true believer. "The ability to not just recover lost memories, but to refine and improve the entire cognitive experience." The first week passed uneventfully. Dr. Vasquez reviewed research protocols, familiarized herself with the facility's impressive array of neuroimaging equipment, and met her colleagues. The team was small but distinguished, drawn from prestigious institutions across the country. Everyone seemed genuinely excited about the research possibilities, and the work environment felt collegial and professional. It was during her second week that she first encountered the subjects. They were housed in what the staff euphemistically called the residential wing, a series of comfortable rooms that looked more like a high-end hotel than a medical facility. The subjects themselves appeared to be volunteers from various backgrounds. College students earning extra money, retirees participating in what they believed were memory improvement studies, young professionals seeking cognitive enhancement. Dr. Vasquez was assigned to monitor the neurological responses of Subject 15, a 23-year-old graduate student named Amanda Chen, who had volunteered for what she thought was a study on meditation and stress reduction. Amanda was bright, articulate, and genuinely curious about the research process. During their initial interview, she mentioned her interest in neuroscience and her hope that participating might give her insights useful for her own psychology studies. The first session seemed routine. Amanda was placed in a comfortable reclining chair, while electrodes monitored her brain activity. Dr. Webb explained that they would be using a combination of guided meditation, subliminal audio frequencies, and mild electromagnetic stimulation to induce enhanced states of consciousness. Amanda signed the additional consent forms without hesitation, trusting in the medical credentials and institutional affiliations of everyone involved. But as Dr. Vasquez watched the readings from the monitoring equipment, something felt wrong. The neural patterns being induced weren't consistent with meditation or relaxation. Instead, she was seeing the kind of disrupted brainwave activity associated with severe psychological trauma or drug-induced dissociation. When she voiced her concerns to Dr. Webb, he assured her that the readings were within normal parameters for their advanced techniques. "We're working at the very edge of consciousness research," he explained. "The patterns you're seeing represent the brain's transition into enhanced states of awareness. It may look unusual on the monitors, but the subjects report profound positive experiences." Indeed, when Amanda emerged from the session, she seemed euphoric. She described vivid experiences of expanded consciousness, feelings of universal connection, and insights into the nature of reality that she found profoundly meaningful. She eagerly scheduled her next session, convinced that she was participating in groundbreaking research that would benefit humanity. But Dr. Vasquez couldn't shake her unease. That night, she accessed the facility's research database and began reviewing the historical data from previous subjects. What she found made her blood run cold. The project had been running for over 2 years, with more than 300 participants. The early sessions followed the same pattern Amanda was experiencing: euphoric reports from subjects combined with increasingly abnormal neural activity. But as the sessions progressed, the subjects began to change in disturbing ways. Memory gaps became common. Subjects would lose hours or days, with no recollection of how they had spent the time. Personality alterations were documented, but dismissed as positive growth experiences. Most troubling of all, many subjects reported feeling compelled to recruit friends and family members for the program, spreading the researchers' influence through their personal networks like a kind of psychological contagion. Dr. Vasquez cross-referenced the subject database with local missing persons reports and found a pattern that chilled her to the bone. Approximately 30% of the long-term participants had simply vanished from their normal lives. They had withdrawn from schools, quit jobs, severed relationships, and disappeared without explanation. When family members inquired, they were told that the subjects had completed their participation and left of their own accord. The next morning, Dr. Vasquez confronted Dr. Webb with her findings. His reaction was swift and decisive. Within an hour, she found herself in a meeting with the facility's security director and a woman who introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Chen from the project's oversight committee. Dr. Vasquez, the woman began, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. You've stumbled upon information that's classified at the highest levels of government. Project Echo isn't just academic research. It's a national security initiative with implications that extend far beyond what you've been told. The truth, as it was revealed to her, was far more sinister than she had imagined. Project Echo was the latest evolution of programs that traced their lineage back to MK Ultra and other Cold War-era experiments in mind control. But where those earlier efforts had been crude and limited in scope, Echo represented a quantum leap in sophistication. Using advanced neurotechnology, electromagnetic manipulation, and carefully designed psychological protocols, the project had successfully developed techniques for completely rewriting human consciousness. Subjects weren't just having their memories altered. They were being fundamentally reprogrammed at the neurological level, turned into assets who could be activated and controlled remotely. The subjects you've been monitoring, Dr. Chen explained, are being prepared for deep cover infiltration missions. They'll be inserted into various organizations and institutions, living normal lives until they receive activation signals. Then they'll carry out their programmed objectives with no conscious awareness of what they're doing. Dr. Vasquez listened in horror as the scope of the operation was revealed. Echo wasn't targeting just random volunteers. The recruitment process specifically sought individuals with access to sensitive information, positions of influence, or connections to high-value targets. Amanda Chen, for instance, wasn't just a graduate student. Her father was a senior researcher at the Centers for Disease Control, and her boyfriend worked for a major defense contractor. You have two choices, Dr. Chen continued. You can continue your work here under enhanced security protocols, receiving compensation that will set you up for life, or you can attempt to leave, in which case you'll be processed through the same protocols as our subjects. The threat was clear. Dr. Vasquez had seen too much to be allowed to simply walk away. But she also understood that agreeing to continue would make her complicit in what amounted to the systematic destruction of human free will on a massive scale. That night, she made a decision that would change everything. Instead of choosing between the options she'd been given, she chose a third path: resistance. Dr. Vasquez had always been methodical in her approach to research, and she applied that same systematic thinking to documenting the truth about Project Echo. Using her access to the facility's systems, she began copying files, recording conversations, and gathering evidence of the program's true purpose and scope. What she discovered was even more extensive than she had feared. Project Echo was just one component of a larger initiative called Operation Mindbridge, which had been active for over a decade. Similar facilities operated across the country, each refining different aspects of consciousness manipulation. The ultimate goal was the creation of a network of unknowing assets embedded throughout American society, capable of being activated for intelligence gathering, sabotage, or elimination of threats to national security. The subjects weren't just being programmed for specific missions. They were being used as test platforms for increasingly sophisticated forms of mental control. Some were given implanted memories so detailed and emotionally resonant that they became indistinguishable from real experiences. Others had their entire personalities rewritten, transforming from one type of person into another with surgical precision. Most disturbing of all were the experiments in collective consciousness manipulation. Groups of subjects were linked through shared programming, creating hive mind networks that could be controlled as a single entity. These networks were being tested for their ability to influence public opinion, spread specific ideologies, and even trigger mass behavioral changes in targeted populations. Dr. Vasquez realized that what she was witnessing wasn't just unethical research. It was a fundamental assault on human autonomy that threatened the very foundations of democratic society. If Operation Mindbridge succeeded in its goals, the distinction between free will and programmed behavior would become meaningless. But documenting the evidence was only the first step. Getting it to people who could act on it would be far more challenging. The project's security measures were extensive, and Dr. Vasquez knew that any attempt to communicate with the outside world would be detected and stopped. Her opportunity came during a planned power outage for facility maintenance. In the brief window when the monitoring systems were down, she uploaded her evidence to a series of anonymous file-sharing sites and sent encrypted messages to investigative journalists, human rights organizations, and government oversight committees. The response was swift and brutal. Within hours of the upload, Dr. Vasquez found herself detained by facility security. Dr. Webb, his earlier cordiality replaced by cold efficiency, informed her that she would be processed as a subject herself. Her memories of Project Echo erased and replaced with false recollections of a routine consulting assignment that had ended amicably. But the damage had already been done. The evidence she had gathered was spreading through networks that the project's controllers couldn't fully monitor or suppress. Independent researchers began verifying her claims, connecting Project Echo to other suspicious research initiatives and unexplained behavioral changes in public figures. The first mainstream news report appeared 3 weeks later, carefully worded to avoid legal challenges, but raising serious questions about government-funded consciousness research. Congressional representatives began asking for briefings on psychological operations and human experimentation. Families of missing persons started connecting their loved ones' disappearances to the research facilities Dr. Vasquez had identified. As the investigation gained momentum, the true scope of Operation Mindbridge began to emerge. Whistleblowers from other facilities came forward, each adding pieces to a puzzle that revealed a systematic program of human experimentation that dwarfed anything previously known. The network of programmed assets was vast, potentially numbering in the thousands, embedded throughout government, media, academia, and corporate America. But even as the truth was being revealed, the forces behind Operation Mindbridge weren't passive. The investigation faced constant obstacles. Key witnesses died in suspicious accidents. Evidence disappeared from secure servers, and researchers found themselves discredited or threatened into silence. Dr. Vasquez herself became a target. After her memories were partially restored through experimental procedures, she found herself living in protective custody, her testimony crucial to exposing the program, but her life constantly at risk from those who had invested too much in keeping the truth hidden. The public revelations about Project Echo and Operation Mindbridge sent shockwaves through American society. The realization that thousands of citizens had been unknowingly programmed as government assets raised fundamental questions about consent, human rights, and the limits of state power. Families searched for signs that their loved ones might have been compromised, while institutions scrambled to identify potentially programmed individuals within their ranks. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the revelations was the question they raised about the nature of consciousness itself. If human memory and personality could be so completely manipulated, What did that mean for concepts of identity and free will? How many of the thoughts and decisions that people believed were their own had actually been implanted by sophisticated programming techniques? The legal and political aftermath of the scandal would continue for years, with congressional investigations, criminal trials, and civil lawsuits attempting to hold accountable those responsible for the violation of human consciousness on such a massive scale. But for Dr. Vasquez, the most important outcome was the knowledge that her decision to resist had prevented something even worse: the complete implementation of a system that would have turned human beings into unwitting puppets in a game they never knew they were playing. The fight to preserve human autonomy in the face of advancing neurotechnology was far from over. But thanks to her courage in speaking truth to power, that fight would at least be conducted in the light of day rather than in the shadows where such programs thrived. The warehouse's early warning system starts screaming at 4:17 a.m., 3 hours after they finished analysing the intercepted conference call. Nova jolts awake from her desk, where she'd fallen asleep reviewing genetic modification patents. The screens around her flash red as multiple intrusion detection systems trigger simultaneously. "Lynx!" she shouts, adrenaline cutting through exhaustion. "We've got company!" Lynx rolls out of his sleeping bag, grabbing his laptop and a go bag he keeps permanently packed. Old habits from his intelligence days. "What kind of company?" "The kind that uses military-grade network penetration tools," Nova responds, her fingers flying across keyboards as she tries to lock down their systems. "Someone's been watching us." Jax appears from the back room, purple hair messy from sleep, but their eyes sharp with focus. "How long have they been in our network?" "Unknown," Nova admits, fighting a losing battle against the intrusion. "But they've got root access to our communication systems. They've seen everything." Kale emerges from his makeshift lab, clutching a hard drive. "I've backed up all the biological data to an isolated system. If we lose the main servers..." "We're losing everything," Nova confirms, watching as file after file disappears from their local storage. They're not just infiltrating, they're sanitizing, removing all traces of what we've found. But even as their digital fortress crumbles around them, Nova's mind races ahead to their backup protocols. Years of paranoia have taught her to prepare for exactly this scenario. "Jax, activate the mesh network. Lynx, get the satellite uplink ready. We're going distributed." The warehouse transforms as hidden systems come online. What appeared to be a simple hacker den reveals itself as a sophisticated intelligence operation. Jax's workstation unfolds into a multi-array communication hub. Lynx produces equipment that definitely didn't come from civilian sources. Nova's desk reveals hidden servers and backup power systems. "Professor," Nova calls, "how much of your research is stored offline?" "Everything critical," Kale confirms. "I learned not to trust cloud storage after they destroyed my academic career." As their attackers continue dismantling their main systems, the team executes an evacuation protocol they've rehearsed but hoped never to use. Critical files transfer to multiple secure locations. Communication channels shift to encrypted networks. Physical evidence gets packed into go bags, but Nova isn't running yet. Instead, she's doing something that would seem insane to anyone who doesn't understand her particular brand of digital warfare. She's tracing the intrusion back to its source. "What are you doing?" Lynx demands, watching her work as alarms continue screaming around them. "If they're watching us," Nova says through gritted teeth, "then we're watching them back." Her screen fills with network traffic analysis, packet traces, and routing information. The attack is sophisticated, routed through multiple proxy servers and anonymization networks. But sophistication creates complexity, and complexity creates vulnerabilities. "There," she breathes, highlighting a data stream. They're not just stealing our files, they're uploading something. The upload completes just as Nova isolates the data stream. A single file placed carefully in their system logs, where it would be discovered during any forensic analysis. Child pornography, Lynx realizes, reading the file metadata. They're setting us up. When law enforcement finds this place, we'll be dismissed as perverts and criminals instead of researchers. Brilliant, Nova finishes. Completely discredit us while making sure no one looks too closely at what we actually found. But Nova's trace has revealed something else, the real location of their attackers. And it's not some anonymous hacker collective or foreign government. They're operating out of the Protein Core building, she announces. Dr. Harrison Vale's company, the same people we watched discussing humanity's extinction 3 hours ago. Jax finishes packing their equipment. We need to leave now. But Nova is still working, her fingers moving with the desperate speed of someone who knows this might be their last chance. Not yet. If they're monitoring us in real time, if they know what we've discovered, then they know we're a threat. Which means her screen fills with a new data stream. Not an attack this time, but intercepted communications from the Protein Core building. They're having an emergency meeting, she realizes, right now, about us. She patches the audio through their speakers, and suddenly, the warehouse fills with voices they recognize from the earlier recording. Confirmed, they have the Phase 3 documentation, Dr. Vale's voice reports. Full technical specifications, implementation timelines, biological modification protocols. How is that possible? The WHO director's voice sounds strained. That information is compartmentalized across 17 different security classifications. Unknown, but their research capabilities suggest state-level intelligence resources. We may have a coordinated opposition. A new voice joins the call. The shadowed figure from the earlier recording, though now speaking with urgent authority rather than calm confidence. Irrelevant. They know enough to compromise the entire operation if they go public. We need immediate containment. What kind of containment? Dr. Vale asks. Total. The team, their research, their facility. Make it look like a lab accident. Chemical fire, explosion, whatever ensures complete evidence destruction. Nova's blood turns to ice as she realizes what they're planning. How long do we have? The WHO director asks. Tactical team is en route, 20 minutes. Nova starts shutting down systems, her movements sharp with controlled panic. We're blown. They're sending a kill team. 20 minutes. Jax checks their watch. That's not enough time to... It's enough time to do one thing. Nova interrupts, pulling up her final contingency protocol. We can't save ourselves, but we can save the evidence. She begins uploading their complete research archive to a decentralized network, blockchain-based storage systems that can't be deleted or controlled by any single authority. But the upload is massive, and their internet connection is already compromised. Upload time, 17 minutes, her system reports. 3 minutes to spare, Lynx says grimly, checking his weapons. If their timeline is accurate. But as if summoned by his words, new alarms start screaming. Motion sensors around the warehouse perimeter. Thermal imaging detecting multiple vehicles approaching from different directions. They lied about the timeline, Nova realizes. The team is already here. Through the grimy windows, they can see black SUVs surrounding the building. Tactical lights sweep across the walls. Radio chatter echoes from outside. Professional, coordinated, lethal. Upload progress, 32%, her computer announces. Nova looks at her team, her friends, her fellow travelers in the digital underground. Jax with their fierce intelligence and boundless optimism. Lynx with his warrior's honor and protective instincts. Kale with his scientist's dedication to truth above comfort. "I need 8 more minutes to finish the upload," she says quietly. "Can you give me 8 minutes?" Lynx checks his rifle, the same model he carried during his government service. Against a professional tactical team in an indefensible position, he looks around the warehouse, their home, their sanctuary, their last stand. "Yeah," he says finally, "we can give you 8 minutes." As the first breaching charges explode against the warehouse doors, Nova's fingers continue dancing across her keyboard, uploading humanity's final testimony to the digital wind. Outside, boots pound against concrete, and orders are shouted in tactical shorthand. Inside, 4 people who stumbled across the end of the world fight to make sure someone, somewhere will know what really happened to the human race. The upload bar crawls toward completion, 47%, 48%, 60%, and in the distance, sirens wail. But whether they're coming to help or to clean up the mess, nobody can tell. Upload progress, 73%. Nova's fingers move across the keyboard with mechanical precision, even as automatic weapons fire tears through the warehouse's steel walls. Lynx and Jax have improvised a defensive position behind stacked servers, returning fire with the small arsenal Lynx maintained for exactly this scenario. Kale crouches beside Nova, clutching his backup drives like sacred relics. "How much longer?" Lynx shouts over the gunfire, ejecting an empty magazine. 3 minutes, Nova responds, sweat dripping onto her keyboard as she maintains the upload connection despite power fluctuations from damaged systems. A tactical team member appears at a broken window. Jax takes him down with a shot that would make their grandfather proud. The same grandfather who taught them to shoot cans off fence posts in rural Oregon, never imagining his lessons would one day be used to defend the future of human civilization. Upload progress, 81%. "Nova!" Kale shouts, pointing at the main screen. "They're jamming our satellite connection." She looks up to see their upload speed dropping rapidly. The decentralized network storage is failing as targeted electromagnetic pulses disrupt their communication arrays. Years of preparation, layers of redundancy, multiple backup systems, all being systematically neutralized by an enemy who understands their capabilities better than they understand themselves. "Switch to the hard line," she orders, pulling cables from emergency ports hidden beneath the floor. "If the satellites are down, we go terrestrial." But even as she reroutes their connection through buried fiber optic cables, her screens show the truth. Their attackers aren't just soldiers. They're technicians equipped with signal intelligence gear and digital warfare tools. This isn't a military assault. It's a surgical data extraction and elimination operation. Upload progress, 89%. They're inside the network, Nova realizes, watching as files begin corrupting during transfer. They're not jamming the connection, they're poisoning it. Malicious code floods through their internet connection, targeting not just their local systems, but the destination servers themselves. Wherever they try to upload their evidence, the same destructive algorithms follow, erasing data as fast as they can transmit it. 90 seconds, Lynx reports, reloading his rifle. "That's all I can give you." Nova's mind races through alternatives. Local storage compromised, cloud servers compromised, peer-to-peer networks compromised. Everywhere they turn, the digital tentacles of their enemies have already reached. But there's one option they haven't tried. One network that exists outside the normal channels of internet communication. "Jax!" she shouts. "Emergency radio protocols. Can you reach the ham radio networks?" Jax nods, understanding immediately. While their enemies have prepared for digital warfare, they might not have anticipated analog communication methods, ancient radio technology that predates the internet by decades. As Jax frantically assembles radio equipment, Nova begins compressing their data files into formats suitable for audio transmission. Everything they've discovered about Project Aegis, the population reduction protocols, the biological modification systems, compressed into digital packets that can be transmitted over shortwave radio frequencies. Upload progress, 94%. Transmission corrupted. Their internet connection dies completely as electromagnetic pulse weapons finish destroying their communication arrays. But Jax's radio equipment sparks to life, connecting them to a network of amateur radio operators who maintain communication protocols independent of corporate or government control. This is Emergency Station Alpha calling CQ emergency, Jax broadcasts. We have critical data for immediate relay to all stations. Repeat, critical data for immediate relay. Responses crackle back from radio operators across the country. Retired engineers, electronics hobbyists, disaster relief volunteers, people who maintain the last truly free communication network on the planet. Nova begins transmitting their compressed data files, sending fragments to different radio operators with instructions for reassembly and distribution. It's slow, inefficient, and incomplete, but it's working until the lights go out. Emergency power kicks in, bathing the warehouse in red light as their main electrical systems fail. Through the broken windows, they can see technicians working on power lines, systematically isolating the building from the electrical grid. They're cutting everything, Kale observes. Power, internet, radio frequency spectrum, complete communication isolation. Nova's laptops switch to battery power, giving her perhaps 10 minutes of operation before total system failure. She continues transmitting data packets over Jax's radio equipment, but the process is agonizingly slow. Nova, Lynx calls urgently. Movement on the roof. They're coming through the skylights. She looks up to see tactical team members rappelling through the warehouse's ceiling. Professional, coordinated, equipped with night vision and thermal imaging. In 30 seconds, they'll have complete control of the space. In 30 seconds, Project Aegis will remain humanity's best-kept secret. But Nova has one final option. One last desperate gambit that violates every principle of operational security she's ever followed. She activates her personal phone's live stream function and begins broadcasting directly to social media. "My name is Nova Chen," she says, looking directly into the camera as gunfire echoes around her. "If you're watching this, you need to know that the world's governments and corporations are planning to kill most of the human race." Her phone screen shows viewer counts climbing rapidly. Hundreds, then thousands of people drawn by the chaos and violence of her live stream. They call it Project Aegis. Population reduction through biological modification. They've poisoned the vaccines, contaminated the food supply, weaponized the environmental monitoring systems. Tactical team members breach their defensive position. Lynx falls, blood spreading across the concrete floor. Jax continues working the radio, transmitting data even as red laser sights dance across their chest. The timeline is 18 months, Nova continues, holding the phone steady despite the chaos. They've already begun implementation. If you've been vaccinated, if you eat processed food, if you use smart devices, you're already carrying the biological modifications they need to. A tactical team member's rifle butt smashes into her skull, sending the phone spinning across the concrete floor. The live stream continues, showing a sideways view of combat boots and spreading pools of blood. But the damage is done. In the 3 minutes her stream was active, over 50,000 people watched Nova Chen's final testimony. And in the age of social media, 50,000 becomes 5 million in a matter of hours. The last thing her phone's camera captures before the screen goes black is a gloved hand reaching down to pick it up. In the background, a voice speaks with calm authority. "Sanitize everything. No evidence, no witnesses, no trace this facility ever existed." Then static, then silence, then nothing. 6 months later, the official report from the Woodland Fire Department described it as a tragic industrial accident. Improper storage of chemical solvents in a converted warehouse led to an explosion that killed 4 squatters and destroyed the building completely. Local news covered it for exactly 1 day before moving on to more compelling stories. The live stream that briefly appeared on various social media platforms was quickly removed for violating community guidelines against violent content and misinformation. Users who tried to share or discuss it found their accounts suspended or shadow banned. Within a week, it had been scrubbed from mainstream platforms entirely. But the internet remembers everything, especially the things someone desperately wants forgotten. On encrypted message boards and dark web forums, fragments of Nova's final broadcast circulate like digital samizdat. Grainy screenshots, audio clips, transcribed quotes passed from user to user through carefully maintained networks of paranoid technologists and dedicated conspiracy researchers. Truthseeker 2030 posts on an anonymous forum. Anyone else remember that warehouse live stream from 6 months ago? The girl talking about Project Aegis. Can't find it anywhere now, but I swear I downloaded a copy. Digital Ghost responds. Had the same video. File corrupted when I tried to open it last week. All my Aegis research just disappeared like it was never there. Red Pill Reality chimes in. Same here, but I remember what she said. Population reduction, biological modifications, food supply contamination. 18 months. We're down to 12 months now. The conversations multiply across platforms that exist in the shadows of the normal internet. Ham radio operators share fragments of the data Jax transmitted in those final minutes. Academic researchers quietly compare notes about unusual patterns in pharmaceutical trials and agricultural modifications. Environmental scientists notice anomalies that match the warnings from a warehouse that officially never existed. Dr. Sarah Martinez, epidemiologist at UC Davis, publishes a paper about unexplained fertility decline in rural agricultural communities. She doesn't mention Project Aegis directly, but her data matches the patterns Nova's team identified with unsettling accuracy. Professor David Kim at MIT releases research about novel proteins found in certain vaccine batches, proteins with no apparent therapeutic function. His funding gets cut 3 weeks later, and his department chair suggests he focus on less controversial research topics. Environmental journalist Lisa Chen, no relation to Nova despite the shared surname, investigates reports of unusual biometric surveillance equipment appearing in remote areas. Her article gets killed by her editor, who explains that the magazine's parent company has concerns about unfounded conspiracy theories. But each cancelled publication, each suppressed research project, each deleted social media post creates a new data point in a pattern that becomes hard to ignore. The truth spreads like a virus through the digital underground. 12 months later, Maya Patel is 17 years old and has never heard of Nova Chen, Lynx Rodriguez, Jax Morrison, or Professor Kale. She lives in a small village in rural India where internet access is limited and social media is considered a luxury for urban elites. But Maya is smart, curious, and has access to her school's computer lab 3 days a week. She spends her time learning about environmental science, genetic engineering, and the intersection of technology and biology. Her dream is to study at a Western university and help solve the world's agricultural challenges. It's during one of these computer lab sessions that she finds the flash drive. Buried in a box of discarded electronics donated to the school, wrapped in plastic and electrical tape, like someone tried very hard to preserve it. The label, written in faded ink, reads, Population Zero Proof Vault. Maya plugs it into the computer, expecting maybe some students' old homework or family photos. Instead, she finds 847 gigabytes of encrypted data files, research documents, intercepted communications, and video recordings. She finds genetic modification protocols, pharmaceutical patents, agricultural contamination systems, and psychological warfare strategies. She finds the complete archive of everything Nova Chen's team discovered about Project Aegis. The encryption is military grade, but Maya is patient and clever. She spends 3 weeks cracking the access codes, working during lunch breaks and staying after school until the janitor kicks her out. When she finally opens the files, she spends another week just trying to understand what she's looking at. Population reduction through coordinated biological intervention. Genetic modification systems activated by environmental triggers. Food chain contamination designed to cause sterility and immune system failure. Psychological warfare campaigns to normalize extinction and reduce resistance to authority. A timeline that originally targeted 2030 but has been accelerated to 2027. Maya realizes she's looking at the blueprint for humanity's planned extinction. And according to the timestamps on the most recent files, the final phase is scheduled to begin in 6 months. She copies everything to multiple storage devices and begins the careful process of verification, cross-referencing patent filings, pharmaceutical research, agricultural modifications, environmental monitoring data. Every piece of evidence Nova's team gathered, Maya confirms through independent research. It's all true, it's all happening, and almost nobody knows. But Maya Patel is 17 years old, raised in a culture that reveres education and truth-telling above personal safety. She doesn't consider keeping the information secret. She doesn't wonder if she might be wrong. She doesn't worry about the consequences of speaking truth to power. She uploads everything to every platform she can access. WikiLeaks, anonymous file-sharing networks, academic databases, social media platforms, government transparency websites, journalist tip lines, activist organizations, environmental groups, medical research communities. She translates key documents into 17 languages and distributes them through international networks. She creates simplified summaries for non-technical audiences and detailed analyses for subject matter experts. She floods the internet with the truth about Project Aegis. And this time, it's too late to stop the signal. Within hours, Maya's uploads are being downloaded thousands of times. Within days, the downloads become millions. Major news outlets pick up the story. Government officials demand investigations. International health organizations call emergency sessions. The carefully orchestrated plan to reduce human population through biological warfare becomes the most documented conspiracy in human history. Dr. Harrison Vale attempts to discredit the documents as sophisticated forgeries. The WHO director claims the communications were taken out of context. Government officials deny any knowledge of population reduction protocols. But the evidence is overwhelming. The documentation is comprehensive, and the verification is independent. Too many researchers in too many countries using too many different methodologies all reach the same conclusion. Project Aegis is real, it's operational, and it's working. Global fertility rates have dropped 34% over the past 3 years. Autoimmune disorders have increased 78% in demographics that received certain vaccine formulations. Agricultural workers in modified crop regions show genetic markers consistent with engineered biological agents. Psychological depression and suicide rates have reached historic highs in precisely the age groups targeted by media manipulation campaigns. The population reduction protocol isn't a future threat. It's already killed millions of people. 18 months after the warehouse, Maya Patel stands before the International Criminal Court in The Hague, testifying about the greatest crime in human history. Behind her sits a display showing population statistics, fertility decline curves, mortality data, and genetic modification evidence. She holds up a small flash drive, the same one she found in a box of discarded electronics in her school's computer lab. This device, she tells the court, contains the complete records of Project Aegis, compiled by 4 researchers who died trying to warn the world about what was being done to us. She sets the drive on the witness stand. Nova Chen was 26 years old when she was murdered for discovering that our governments and corporations had poisoned the human race. Lynx Rodriguez was 32 when he died defending her right to tell the truth. Jax Morrison was 21 when they gave their life to upload this evidence to radio networks around the world. Professor Kale was 58 when he was killed for asking the wrong questions about biological modification research. Maya looks directly at the defendants, pharmaceutical executives, government officials, and corporate leaders who sit in chains behind bulletproof glass. They died so that we could live. They died so that humanity would know what was done to us. They died so that the people responsible for the greatest genocide in history would be held accountable. She picks up the flash drive again. Their names were Nova, Lynx, Jax, and Kyle. They saved our species, and they want you to remember that the truth is always worth fighting for, no matter how powerful the people who want to hide it. The courtroom falls silent as Maya's testimony ends. In the gallery, family members of victims weep quietly. In the press section, journalists furiously type stories that will reach billions of readers within hours. And in a small village in rural India, a 17-year-old girl's computer science teacher watches the live broadcast and smiles proudly at his former student. Sometimes the truth finds a way. Sometimes the good guys win. Sometimes 4 people in a warehouse can save the world, even after they're gone. 5 years later, the Maya Patel Institute for Digital Truth and Transparency occupies a gleaming building in New Geneva, funded by reparations payments from the corporations responsible for Project Aegis. Its mission statement, carved in stone above the entrance, reads, "The network remembers everything, especially the things someone desperately wants forgotten." In the lobby, 4 portraits hang side by side. Nova Chen, cryptographer and digital warrior; Lynx Rodriguez, intelligence analyst and protector; Jax Morrison, social engineer and technological prodigy; Professor Kyle, virologist and truth teller. Beneath their portraits, a simple inscription: "They found the code that wasn't meant to be found." Tourists and students pass by the portraits daily, most not knowing the full story of how 4 people in a converted warehouse prevented the extinction of human civilization. But the staff of the Institute know. The researchers working on digital rights and technological transparency know. The activists fighting against corporate surveillance and biological manipulation know. And late at night, when the building is empty and the servers hum quietly in climate-controlled rooms, network traffic monitors occasionally detect unusual patterns in the data streams. Fragments of code that shouldn't exist, routed through pathways that don't appear on any network topology. Some say it's just background noise, artifacts of old systems and deprecated protocols. Others believe it's something more. Digital ghosts of 4 researchers who refuse to let death stop their work. Still uploading, still broadcasting, still fighting to keep the truth alive in the spaces between the data. The network remembers everything. And sometimes, late at night in the digital underground, the network remembers back.